Welcome to JoJo Gnome's Story Podcast with Jo Hall, brought to you from a garden shed in Scotland. Hello there and welcome to podcast number 23. Let me ask you a question. Do you like stories? Well, that's a silly kind of question. Of course you like stories. We all like stories. But do you like stories in comic books? When I was wee, I used to love comics with their colourful pictures. I think I liked them even before I could read because I could tell what was going on in the story by just looking at the pictures. Well, JoJo Gnome loves comic books, and he likes one in particular about a character called Inky the Invisible. Inky's a superhero, and her superpower is that she can become invisible and help people. Today's story is all about being a superhero. Are you ready to listen? It's called JoJo Gnome Superhero. Thanks so much, said JoJo Gnome, taking a brand new comic from his grandpa. You deserve it, said Grandpa, smiling. You've been such a great help this week in the garden. There had been a lot of planting and watering to do, and JoJo had helped his grandpa, who'd hurt his back and found it difficult to bend down. JoJo had planted lots of vegetable seedlings for Grandpa and watered the plants and flowers every day. I like helping in the garden, said JoJo, settling down to read his comic. The comic was about JoJo's favourite superhero, Inky the Invisible. Inky would help people out secretly while being invisible, when no one could see her. She would then leave them a note written in ink to tell them everything was going to be okay. The stories were full of adventures and quite funny too. JoJo had just finished his comic and was going to add it to the pile in his room when he heard his Auntie Molly calling him from the kitchen. "JoJo, can you help me please?" she asked. "What is it, Auntie Molly?" said JoJo. When he went into the kitchen, there was a basket on the table. Beside it was food. There was jam, some carrots, and one of Auntie Molly's lovely yummy cakes. "JoJo, can you leave this on the Pixies' front doorstep, please? The Pixie twins have got spots and they have to stay in the house till they get better. Their mum hasn't been able to go to the shops, so I'm just sending her a few things," she said. JoJo took the basket. "It's not too heavy, is it?" said Auntie Molly. "I would ask Grandpa, but his back's still quite sore." "No, it's fine, Auntie Molly," said JoJo, heading for the door with the basket. As he walked along the road with his new comic book under his arm, JoJo was thinking about his comic collection. This would mean that he now had 5 Inky the Invisible comic books. JoJo loved reading and rereading the comics and looking at the drawings, which were always so colourful. He liked the way that in comics the characters' words appear in round shapes called speech bubbles. And if they're thinking things, the words appear in clouds called thought bubbles. Wow, thought JoJo. What if people could actually see what you're thinking? Now that would be an amazing superpower. Before he knew it, he was at the Pixie's house. The Pixie twins appeared at the window. JoJo waved at them. They were looking very spotty. Their mum pulled them away quickly. They didn't look very happy about that. JoJo put the basket on the top step like Auntie Molly told him to. He was walking away when the Pixie's mum appeared from round the side of the house. "Thanks so much, JoJo," she said. "This'll cheer the twins up a bit. They'll love your Auntie Molly's cake." "Everyone loves my Auntie Molly's cake," said JoJo Gnome. "The twins have been really sore and itchy. It's the spots, you see," explained their mum. "They've been feeling really quite grumpy today." "See you later, JoJo," she said and turned to go round the side of the house again. Wait a minute," said JoJo, and taking the comic from under his arm, he slipped it into the basket. This'll cheer them up. It's the latest Inky the Invisible story, he said. Oh, thanks so much. They'll love that, she said, waving goodbye. Later that night, after dinner, Grandpa Gnome, Auntie Molly and JoJo were all sitting round the table. They were just finishing their dinner. It was fresh fruit salad, and JoJo had kept the strawberries till last because he liked them the best. Can I have a look at your comic? Asked Grandpa. I could do with a laugh. JoJo looked worried. He wasn't sure what Grandpa would think of him giving away his new comic. So he told Auntie Molly and Grandpa what he'd done that afternoon. I'm sorry, Grandpa, he said. I really liked the comic and I'm sure the Pixie twins will give it back when they're well. Inside, JoJo wasn't so sure about getting the comic back as the Pixie twins weren't very careful with other people's things. Grandpa pushed his glasses further up his nose and looked at JoJo. He was smiling. JoJo, you're a very kind little gnome, he said. That was a good thing you did, giving them your comic. Auntie Molly looked happy too. Before JoJo went to sleep that night, Grandpa came in to turn out the light. JoJo was reading an old Inky the Invisible comic. Inky was on the cover with a red cape that went invisible when she called on her superpowers. Do you know something, Grandpa? I wish I was a superhero like Inky, said JoJo, yawning. Next morning, when JoJo went down for breakfast, there was a parcel on the table. It had a label on it. The label said, To JoJo Gnome, Superhero. Looks like there's something for you, JoJo, said Grandpa, handing it to him. JoJo Gnome Superhero, said JoJo, taking the parcel. Well, last night you said you wanted to be a superhero, said Grandpa. JoJo nodded. Well, I told Auntie Molly what you said and she thought you were already a superhero. JoJo looked puzzled. I can't be a superhero. I've got no superhero powers. Auntie Molly smiled. We think you do, she said. We think you're kind, caring, and very generous, finished Grandpa. We wanted to give our JoJo superhero a wee present. Those aren't real superhero powers, said JoJo, scratching his head. What do all superheroes do in stories, JoJo? Asked Grandpa Gnome. Help people? Replied JoJo. Yes, they do, and they use their superpowers to help people. And JoJo, you used your superpowers to help people too, said Auntie Molly. You were kind to Grandpa Gnome, helping him in the garden. You also delivered the food to the pixies for me, said Auntie Molly. And you were generous and gave the sick pixies your new comic to cheer them up. We're both very proud of you. Enough talking. Open your present. Auntie Molly's made you something very special. JoJo Gnome pulled the wrapping off, and there was a bright red cape with JoJo written on the back in yellow. Wow, that's amazing, Auntie Molly. Thank you, said JoJo, putting it on. As he shook it out, something else fell on the floor. It was a brand new copy of the Inky the Invisible comic. Oh, Grandpa, thanks so much. Well, I thought you might have a bit of a wait before you got yours back, laughed Grandpa. JoJo Gnome was delighted. Superhero JoJo on the go! Let's see who I can help today, he shouted, running out into the garden with his red cape flying in the wind behind him. Did you enjoy that story? I think that being kind is a brilliant superpower. What would you have as your superpower? Would it be something like Inky's superpower of being invisible? Or would you like to be able to walk up walls or even fly? Or would your superpower be more like JoJo's and you'd be able to help people by being kind or caring? have a think about that and draw me a picture of what you think you, as a superhero, looks like. You might have special equipment, or you might need different clothes. You never know, you might even have a special cape, just like JoJo did. In JoJo Gnome's new book, JoJo Gnome and the Scarecrow has a kind of superpower. He's amazing at gardening and making things grow. He helped JoJo Gnome make a beautiful garden. The book's filled with colourful pictures and there's a wee mouse hidden in every page for you to find. You can buy the book from JoJo Gnome's website at www.jojognome.com, and if you live in the UK, postage is free. Or, if you prefer, you can buy an e-book copy from Amazon and download it to enjoy. Well, now it's time for you to come up with your own story. I'll start it off and you decide how it ends. In this story, JoJo Gnome's playing a game and he needs some help to make it work. It was a bright sunny morning and JoJo Gnome and his friends were sitting in the garden, all quite far apart from each other. They were having a rest as they'd all been running about playing one of Grandpa's fun games. They'd all taken turns to move round the garden when he'd called their names. The only thing was they had to move in the way that Grandpa had said. "JoJo, you have to move round the garden like a superhero," said Grandpa. So JoJo had run round, giving his best superhero moves, which had included some jumping and also spinning round. His new red cape swirled round him when he moved. "Pixies, you need to move round the garden copying what each other's doing," said Grandpa Gnome. This was very funny, as it took ages for either of them to move at all, as they were waiting for the other twin to start. But once they did, they took it in turns to hop, twirl and roll round the garden. Fatima Fairy was last. "Without flying, Fatima, you have to get round the garden backwards," said Grandpa. Fatima could hardly go backwards as she was giggling so much. "That would have been so much easier if I was flying," she said. "But not as much fun," said JoJo Gnome. Fatima agreed. They'd all got their breath back now and were waiting for Grandpa to start the game again. He popped his head out of the kitchen window. "JoJo, I'm going to be a wee while. Why don't you start playing the game again yourselves? JoJo, you can be the first one to give the instructions." Fatima and the pixies looked at JoJo, waiting to see what instructions they would be given. JoJo looked round the garden. There was a frog jumping near the pond, a worm slithering its way across the soil, and there were birds hopping from branch to branch in the big apple tree. "Come on, JoJo, me first this time." JoJo thought. He knew exactly what he was going to tell Fatima to go round the garden doing. It's over to you to finish the story. Well, what move will JoJo Gnome give Fatima? Will he get some ideas from the things he looked at in the garden? What do you think? Send me some pictures and let me know what ideas you come up with. You can get in touch by email at jojognome@gmail.com. If you look at the podcast page for podcast 23, there are some pictures from today's story. All the information you'll need is at www.jojognome.com. Well, that's almost it from JoJo Gnome's Story Podcast today. Teachers and parents can keep up with JoJo Gnome fun on Twitter at JoJo Gnome and check out our Instagram feed also at JoJo Gnome. If you're on Facebook, you'll find all things JoJo Gnome at JoJo Gnome Fun. Finally, a big thank you to Al Fleming for our great music. Thank you for listening and remember to subscribe to the podcast. If you've enjoyed the stories, tell your friends about us. Remember, keep enjoying stories. Till next time, goodbye.